Back in December 2005, do you remember there was a debate in Chicago between John Yoo and the Notre Dame professor Doug Castle? If you remember this, it's because you heard this famous audio from that.
If the president deems that he's got to torture somebody, including by crushing the testicles of the person's child, there is no law that can stop that. No treaty. And then also no law by Congress. That's what you wrote in the August 2002 memo.
I think it depends on why the president thinks he needs to do that.
Depends, he said. Doing that to someone's child might be totally kosher. Depends on the motivation of the President of the United States in wanting to do it. That is the lawyer the Bush administration called on to write legal opinions that said it wasn't illegal to torture anymore. In the Justice Department report on what John Yoo did, he's also quoted as saying this under questioning. Question: what about ordering a village of resistance to be massacred? Is that a power that the president could legally? Answer from John Yoo: yeah, although let me say this. So certainly that would fall within the commander-in-chief's power over tactical decisions. Question: to order a village of civilians to be exterminated? Answer from John Yoo: sure. Sure, why not? Law schma, I'm John Yoo, and whatever you want me to okay, I'll okay. Massacring villages full of civilians? Crushing the testicles of a child in front of his parents to get the parents to talk? Yeah, that's America. John Yoo and Jay Bybee, who was John Yoo's boss and is now a federal judge, are basically home free now. This Justice Department report says they shouldn't be disbarred or have any other action taken against them for writing and signing off on these declarations that torture was legal. Meanwhile, today, what federal officials call one of the most serious terrorism threats to the United States since 9/11 ended with a guilty plea in a civilian court of a sworn terrorist who was arrested as a criminal, read his rights, given access to a lawyer, and who cooperated with authorities while he was questioned legally without being tortured. Najibullah Zazi's case has already led to charges against his father, his uncle, 2 friends of his, and a New York imam. And now he will do time, likely a life sentence, in an American prison. And in the face of effective counterterrorism efforts like that, the John Yoos and Judge Jay Bybees of the world and all the people delighted that John Yoo and Jay Bybee got away with what they did will keep fantasizing about an America that reacts to terrorism by torturing children in front of their parents, instead of just doing what works. We're joined now by Michael Isikoff, investigative correspondent with Newsweek magazine, also an MSNBC contributor. Mr. Isikoff, thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Rachel.
Did we learn anything new from the OPR report about what was actually done to prisoners?
I actually thought it was the most illuminating report we've had yet. About this whole controversy, about all what was going on in terms of the enhanced interrogation techniques. It sort of walks step by step about how the administration came to approve these tactics, the back and forth between the CIA and the Justice Department and the White House. As in terms of one single document, I think it's the most exhaustive we've had yet. And direct answer to the question, yeah, we got some interesting new glimpses, some of them a bit gruesome, into actually what was being done. One of the issues that comes up in this report is Justice Department lawyers, after John Yoo and Jay Bybee have left, are pressing for, they're being asked to approve once again the tactics being used. And one of them, Dan Levin, says, I need to know more about what you're actually doing. Tell me what this is like. Tell me what, say, sleep deprivation means. And there's a passage in the report where he learns and discovers, I think you may have the quote, he learns that detainees are being shackled in a standing position, naked except for a diaper, with their hands handcuffed at hand level to a chain bolted to the ceiling. In some cases, a prisoner's hands would be shackled above the head for more than 2 hours at a time. In other cases, a prisoner would be shackled in a seated position to a small stool so that they had to stay awake to keep his balance. Now, we've heard the description sleep deprivation before. We haven't had that kind of vivid word picture. And I think if you take through all the techniques being used, it does raise, once again, some serious questions. What was really going on here? What did this look like?
Former Vice President Cheney has repeatedly said that a specific CIA memo that he saw proved that waterboarding was an effective interrogation technique, and he said that he wanted that memo unclassified. You wrote this weekend, though, that even though that memo has not been released, because of the OPR report, we now essentially know what was in it?
Right, and it would be, the contents would be a bit awkward for the former vice president. One of the claims being made for the effectiveness of waterboarding and these techniques is that from Abu Zubaydah, the first guy subjected to them, the CIA was able to get information that led to the arrest of Jose Padilla, the alleged dirty bomber, in May of 2003. Well, as the Justice Department report points out, Jose Padilla was actually arrested in May of 2002, before Zubaydah was waterboarded, before these enhanced techniques were applied. So and as we reported last year in Newsweek, actually it was FBI agent Ali Soufan and one of his colleagues that got this information using traditional law enforcement techniques. So one of the chief claims being used by the CIA and Vice President Cheney for the effectiveness of these techniques was called, in this Justice Department report, plainly inaccurate.
Unless they have some sort of magical time travel technique that we haven't learned about either. Newsweek's Michael Isikoff, thank you for your reporting. Thank you for reading between the lines in the way that you did in order to get this reporting done this week, and it's really helpful. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Rachel.
President Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, has just authorized the CIA to assassinate an American citizen. That citizen is Anwar al-Awlaki, a Muslim cleric born in New Mexico in the USA, but currently believed to be living in Yemen. Al-Awlaki is regarded as the spiritual leader by jihadists and the Fort Hood shooter, and Awlaki's speeches undeniably describe terrorists as martyrs who will enter paradise for their actions. However, he has not proven to have ordered any specific terrorist actions, and he has certainly not been convicted by any court of law. Nevertheless, he is now targeted for death by the United States government. The government of Yemen says it is unconvinced of his guilt, and it does not plan to assist the U.S. in finding him, certainly doesn't plan to assist the U.S. in killing him. But doesn't the Constitution apply wherever the government goes? Isn't it still murder to shoot someone by the government without due process of law? My next guest, Kelly Vallejos, a former FoxNews.com reporter who now covers national security issues for the American Conservative magazine, is as skeptical of all of this as I am. Kelly, welcome to Freedom Watch.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So why isn't there a public uproar in the media about this? I mean, this is about as unconstitutional, as violative of first principles as anything ever is, that the President of the United States could order the government of the United States to murder an American because of what he has said.
Well, I think it's because the media hasn't shaped it in that exact narrative. The way it's been shaped is that this suspected terrorist, Al-Awlaki, is a terrorist. It is not emphasized that he is an American. It is emphasized that he does have ties to the Fort Hood shooter, to the Christmas Day bomber, even ties, however tenuous, to the 9/11 hijackers. That's the narrative we hear. It has not been emphasized that he is an American citizen and afforded the due process in our Constitution and protection by the rule of law, which makes this country so good and strong. So I think the media, on the most part, the mainstream media has fallen down on the job where it comes to this case.
You know, the CIA has a history of political assassinations. We all think we know that. There's obviously no official sources, although from time to time somebody's documents appear after they die, and it sort of reinforces those ideas. But I don't know of any history of actually murdering Americans. If the President of the United States can order this guy killed, no matter how evil he may be, where would this stop? Who would they order to be killed next? And what other parts of the Constitution will they cut out when it's inconvenient to their present purposes?
Correct. And I say welcome to the short history of the global war on terror. What I'm reading here is that the 2002 authorization for the use of force against al-Qaeda is being used to justify the order to kill this guy. And that justification has been used over and over again in the many, many flawed extrajudicial killings, detentions, high-value interrogation, if you will, of terror suspects for the last decade. And as we know, there is a thicket flawed and ruinous cases in terms of people being suspected of terrorism, and it turns out the government didn't have much of a case. We've let go scores of suspected terrorists from Guantanamo Bay because their cases were so thin that they were picked up on the battlefield on very flimsy evidence, people turning them in out of vendettas. So we have people in Gitmo that have been languishing there, and we do not have a case for them because the evidence is so thin. So now we're going to talk about killing our American citizens abroad when we don't know what kind of evidence we have against this guy. For all we know, it could be as flimsy as all those cases over the last decade, and that's very troublesome.
We're chatting with Kelly Vlahos from the American Conservative magazine. You know, there's only one crime that's actually defined in the Constitution, and it's treason. And treason consists of providing aid and comfort to the enemy or waging war against the United States. And it provides that anybody charged with treason is entitled to a trial, and there have to be at least 2 witnesses to the same overt act. There's nothing anywhere remotely as specific about any other crime in the Constitution. Why? Because the King of England used to charge people with treason simply because they disagreed with him. And the framers wanted to assure that in the United States of America, people were free to speak their own mind and take their own behavior, and if the government thought they were treasonous, they'd get a trial. So even if this al-Awlaki is what the government says he is, even if he has done what the government says he has done, even if people have reacted to his words and ideas as the government says they have reacted, under the Constitution itself, as well as under laws written pursuant to the Constitution, he's entitled to a trial before a neutral jury and a neutral judge, and the government has to produce evidence against him before it can harm a hair on his head. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. But as we've seen over the course of the last decade, we've been ceding those rights that you just spoke of under the name of the global war on terror. I mean, right now, I could be dragged in and detained as an enemy combatant under the current Military Commissions Act. I am afforded the habeas rights, but there's a bill that's been introduced by Senator John McCain that would take away those rights, that would allow the government to detain me without trial indefinitely because of whatever evidence that they have that I have been even a material aider of a terrorist group. So I think that, again, the media has fallen down because time over time, we've seen that Americans' rights have been ceded under the global war on terror. And we've been asked to trust the president, trust the executive, whether it be George Bush or now President Obama, that he has gathered the proper evidence, that he's going after the bad guys. But like you said, there are laws, there are precedents. And in terms of treason, a trial be afforded. Now we're being asked to just hand over the rights of the CIA to go after an American citizen, not knowing what the legal standards are or what the evidence is against this guy. And like you said, he could be a very unsavory character, but he's still an American. And we don't want the slippery slope where tomorrow we wake up and further rights are ceded and they're going after Americans here on a domestic soil for aiding or providing cover, so-called, for terrorism.
Kelly Vlahos, thanks for joining us.